Welcome back to East Coast DNA. As usual, I'm your host, Darcy Walsh, getting back into the routine with some of our bi-weekly episodes. And today we have Halifax-based Katrina Lopes. Welcome,
Yeah,
Katrina.
thank you for having me.
So often I have artists on that I'm talking to about like their latest single or their upcoming project. I've just covered close to a dozen music festivals this summer, so definitely talked to a lot of people about their own organizations and what all goes into those music festivals. Now, you yourself are a music industry veteran. I think I probably am somewhat familiar with you on the management side, but specifically today that you wanted to come here to talk about a new initiative that you have running out of the Halifax area.
Yes, Maidie Music House. And I'm actually still based in Toronto, but I
Okay.
wanted to specifically set up a company initiative entity in Halifax, just because of the need there. There's a real lack of infrastructure, specifically as it relates to supporting Black music. And I've been running a program called the KL Management Black Mentorship Program for a couple of years. And it was mostly to fill a gap that I saw in the industry and just around supporting artists, mostly around like artist development and performance coaching. And it just was becoming very apparent that that wasn't enough and that there was a real lack of infrastructure and a lack of like ecosystem to support Black music. So it kind of evolved into this thing that became much larger. It's a home for mentorship, because as artists grow, as you know, there's one person can't manage all the artists. Like there's a lot, like I said, a lack of infrastructure. So there's also this lack of executives that are sort of coming up alongside them. So I wanted to sort of create a space where we are not only nurturing talent artistically and creatively, but also nurturing the talent around art. Sorry, not artists. I call them young execs, young music professionals who want to work in the industry.
That's very noble and like-minded with some initiatives that I work on behind the scenes as well. I am wondering now, as far as the specifics of it, where you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about it being black based.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I will admit a little bit of ignorance on some of the topics.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, as a Nova Scotia born and raised person, I have some familiarity with some of the different minorities that we have in our different regions. And Black culture itself is something that's always been present. It has a very, very long history. But in the last couple of years, and this is where I will plead a little bit of ignorance because I don't know the specifics, but African Nova Scotians have been recognized as a people, which leads to things like African Nova Scotian Music Association and different. I don't want to make it sound like it's just around funding, but it does open up some funding options specifically from the government when there's a new recognition as a people, similar to what we would have with Indigenous peoples in our region.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, because of the timing of something like this, where I cover East Coast music, obviously the African Nova Scotian Music Association is something that's on my radar.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with some of the work that they do and their annual awards, and I interact with some of that community when I'm specifically at Music Industry Association events. But did that recognition somehow percolate this idea, or is the timing right for other reasons?
Well, ANSMA has been around for over 25 years. I, that certainly wasn't what precipitated this. I think they do some great work. I mean, as a music industry association. And much needed work in the community as an association. There's only so much a music industry association can do.
True.
For me, this really grew out of quite specifically my frustration with working with the limited music industry that's in Nova Scotia, just in general.
Hmm.
And then the other music industry associations in the region, whether that be in Nova Scotia or like the East Coast. Um, and just it taking really a really long time. And I understand change takes a long time, but sometimes it is really like a glacial slow pace. And, I need to be more nimble. And I think like the analogy with, if you're in a little speedboat or even a smaller jet ski, you can turn pretty quickly. When you're in a big cruise ship, it like takes a long time to turn everything around. And I think as a company and as a music industry veteran, like I'm just able to be more nimble and can and I feel like I just don't have time to wait for others to catch up. I don't think artists have time to wait for the industry to catch up. And I think it's not an accident that, the African Nova Scotian community has been in Nova Scotia since the 1700s.
Hmm.
So there has been talent nurtured over centuries, but yet there's still no infrastructure. Like there's still no labels, there's still no music publishers, there's still not really no artist managers. Like I know there are people who are managing, a friend or something, but there's not like a management company. There's not there are like the ANSMA is probably the closest thing we have to some infrastructure in the
Hmm.
region, which is bananas when you think about a population being in a place for so long that has nurtured the creative side and has nurtured the talent. So for me, it came out of, to answer your question, that was a long roundabout way. It really just came out of my frustration of like just things moving so slowly. And I felt like, I've built a career in this. I know what I'm doing, and I just felt like I could do it faster.
And I definitely agree with the speed problem that these days, especially with it being digital based, like an artist cannot wait. I would love myself. I work with some artists on the side in different ways, but if they have a project that they want me to work on, they don't have time for me to learn how to do something. They
Yes.
need like, and I can't like test out the waters with most of them. That they need somebody that knows how to do what they need done, and they need it today,
Yeah.
because today's when the idea is ready to go, and there's not a lot of time to plan ahead because things keep rolling. It's an unfortunate reality of the way our industry works this day.
Yes.
I do like the idea of anticipating an album and release day, sitting down and listening to it, but those days are pretty much gone. So
Yeah.
we do need people, kind of to your point, that
Yeah.
can pivot and pick up something and run with it when it's ready to go, to make sure you get the
Yeah.
momentum.
And even to that point, I think, just the point you just made about albums, like the industry, like funders or industry associations are slow to even realize that like artists aren't releasing albums. Like, so, but you have to, if you're applying for funding, you have to put out an album. So now an
Hmm.
artist has to like create an album to apply for funding for something they weren't going to do. They really maybe just wanted to put out a couple of singles. So that's what I mean about these things that are like, who decided this? Why does it take so long to, like, the industry moves so quickly? And yeah, we just don't have time sometimes for others to catch up with that.
And I do recognize that I have a personal point of privilege where I maybe fall into a majority in most cases. I am very aware of struggles that some minorities will have as far as representation. But the Halifax area, I do think, and I may be wrong, this is quoted from a fact from a long time ago, but at one point anyway, it was touted as being the highest percentage Black population per capita in Canada, in the Halifax area.
Mhm.
So that doesn't mean they're a majority at all, but just that the presence is a little stronger maybe. And I always, from my point of view, felt like there was integration. But the older I got in my life, I've realized that like segregation from years ago, some of it's kept because people are trying to keep their communities together. It's not
Mhm.
that they have to live outside of different areas. So over generations, we have different ways of both one, keeping those communities active and alive, and two, integrating with the rest of the community so that we aren't segregated. I'm wondering, when you do create an initiative like this where it's focused specifically on Black people or a specific culture, do you have any issues? Like, I know if I ran something specifically in one area, I would feel like I was running into roadblocks where I was leaving people out.
Hmm.
And I do realize that as far as many times we've talked on this show, as far as different things with like racism and sexism and homophobia, and representation is really important for getting everyone out there, but also giving an upper hand to some of the minorities levels things out a little bit where maybe other groups had an easier time getting those opportunities in the past. So is an initiative like this to level set, just to focus on a specific area, or like what is kind of the thought behind creating something that's black led from your point of view?
From my point of view, I mean, sorry, there was a lot of things in there
Yeah,
though.
yeah, I know.
um, I think that, I mean, we're not, we, there, the gaps are still present today. So I'm filling a gap that is present. Like this is
Hmm.
not historical. It is also historical, but it's not something that I'm highlighting only because is historical. Like there is literally no music industry infrastructure for Black music in Nova Scotia, and truthfully, not that much nationally. Like there is
Okay.
more, sure, outside of the province, but it is still limited in comparison to the rest of the music industry. Um, I think that those are important distinctions for an artist or for a young music professional to have a space where people or a group of people or a space where you are understood and where you don't have the added emotional labor to have to show up, whether that's not as yourself and
Hmm.
to appease others. So I'll give a different example. When I first started doing my mentorship program, a lot of artists, a lot of Black artists were telling me, like African Nova Scotian artists were telling me they had never been in writing rooms, like songwriting sessions with other Black creatives.
Hmm.
So maybe their sibling or something, but like when they were invited to song camps, they were usually the token Black creative. If there was someone else who was also there, they were definitely not put in the same rooms, so they were spread out. Um, their publishers weren't setting them up with other Black creatives. And so even with their own projects, they were often writing with people in other genres that potentially didn't understand the sound they were looking for.
Sure.
Now, there's absolutely, I'm not saying that artists shouldn't work with people of other genres because sometimes that's where inspiration comes from. There's definitely amazing collaborations that can come from that. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But for me to hear an artist say that they've never been in a writing room with another Black creative, to me was like, I was like, this is fixable. Like we can do that.
Hmm.
So I created a song camp, and I brought Black creatives from Toronto and LA to Nova Scotia specifically to work with African Nova Scotian artists. And it was just 4 days of creating. And one of the main things almost everyone in that room said was that they could show up and immediately just be creative. Like they knew that other people understood who they were. They knew they didn't have to, there was not this extra emotional labor of like, is this a safe space? Is this person like, they didn't have to do that kind of assessment. They
Hmm.
could just show up, be themselves, be creative, and get right into the creation process. And so I think that is what that I'm trying to create that space. And now it's not just in a music camp, not in just a song camp, but as a company, so that you should be able to have a manager who understands, who you are, and that you don't have to, assess, and you don't have to like, because there's going to be so many other problems. Like the music industry is not the most stable industry. Like there's going to be so many other challenges that we're going to run into just working in the music industry.
For
So
sure.
having a team that doesn't get who you are shouldn't be one of them. So I really wanted to create a space for one to create that team, and then also just to create that safety. And then there was something else you mentioned. I, I think I don't know the stat you were talking about in terms of um, the
Population.
like I don't know population numbers.
Hmm.
But like to your point about segregation, I mean, Nova Scotia is different from other parts of Canada in that, we've been here since the 1700s. It was very intentional that our communities were outside of the city because the at the time it was the British colonies, they didn't want to see the black people every day. So they put them in, and they also didn't want to give them good land. So that segregation is geographical. Like, and it is still, those communities still exist. So those are still geographical, that's still like a geographical segregation. Wow, that's
Hmm.
a for me to say. Whereas I think in other cities, that's not necessarily the case because, you know, populations may have immigrated here. It's not that it would, there's still maybe something geographical, but not for centuries. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? I think that's an important distinction to make.
It definitely leads to a little bit of a highlight on the unique culture of our region.
Hmm.
And now you mentioned being Toronto based yourself and then
Yes.
starting this out of the Halifax region. Now, I
Yes.
100% understand why you would pick Halifax as someone that covers the entire East Coast. That's definitely our central location for something like this to occur.
Mhm.
I am wondering now, when I am listening to the answers to the questions, I'm kind of comparing it in my head in a way to try to understand to different initiatives that I'd be familiar with from the last few years. Definitely things in the LGBTQ community. There's been a lot of efforts in towards creating safe spaces and
Mhm.
having like-minded people gather together. Same as well with it's a little different. In a nuanced way, but youth. I'm very
Mhm.
big supporter of youth in the arts communities in general. Sometimes those opportunities are not provided for them, and it's always great to give a little bit of a helping hand for somebody that has a passion in that area. So there's definitely things that all kind of bleed in there where there's a familiar kind of mindset in trying to focus in a group where, as you point out, you find a gap
Yeah.
and you're trying to fill that. So as far as Halifax being a central point for this initiative, how is it that you will get out to smaller communities? Like, do you have a plan on branching out from the urban area into some of our more rural Nova Scotia or further East Coast?
Um, in what context?
Just in the services that you provide, like you'll provide them to them. I'm assuming most artists would have to travel into the Halifax area in order to engage with your team.
No, so the purpose, so okay, maybe I'll clarify this for audience members. I'm
Yes.
Toronto based. I grew up in Halifax. So I grew up in Dartmouth. I went to Colorado High. I went to St. Mary's. I'm from Nova Scotia. I moved to Toronto because I wanted to work in the music industry and I could not do that. I could not build the career that I wanted to build living in Nova Scotia. So as I was building my career, I came home often. I mean, I was obviously coming home often, but I mean intentionally, specifically to run mentorship programs because I just really wanted someone to win. I wanted to be part of that process of someone winning. So in setting up Maidie Music House, it is not like a lot of the talent I'm working with, there's not a lot much more they can do in the Nova Scotia province to move the needle. So
Hmm.
like not to say that we're not going to keep doing that. Obviously, you keep showing up for your fans, but there's not like some other stage or some other goal to reach in the province that's going to move the needle for their career. We need to be doing things on different stages at different levels, whether that be in the rest of Canada or whether that be internationally. So to me, anyone who I believe in and who is there's lots of things that go into sort of assessing if someone is I guess I shouldn't say a great artist, but someone that I would consider working with. Their location isn't really one of them. I mean, I probably wouldn't work with someone who was in a numerous different time zones, that just because that is a bit logistically challenging.
Hmm.
Um, but the purpose is not for us to be doing all of the things in like, yes, we do some workshops and things in Halifax, but really I'm trying to help artists like break through the glass ceiling that they're experiencing there. So I don't think that there's not a limitation to someone who, let's say, they might be in Whitney Pier. Like, and they don't have to come to Halifax because the most time we're not going to be in Halifax
Oh,
either.
fair.
We're,
Okay.
we're we're trying to move the needle. So yeah, does that answer? the question?
It does. Obviously, I needed a little bit of clarity there too, and
Yeah,
that also lends itself to the modern era too. That as far as I asked, like timing wise, why this would be a good time. I don't know that we had the work culture, like outside of the music industry, even
mhm,
that would allow for something like that at the extent that you could do it today, where you really can be flexible. Like even myself, I'm based in
sure.
Glasgow, Nova Scotia, which is fairly remote for most people, unless
Mhm.
you're in an even more remote area. But being based out of this location and having a digital forum, I have presence all around the East Coast. Like
Yes,
I do physically travel, but I'm not physically in another location every day.
yes,
So I do think that not necessarily 2025, but in this modern era, it
yeah.
does
In the
allow that flexibility.
post-pandemic era.
Yeah, exactly. So what are the plans? I know you just had kind of a kickoff celebration.
Yeah,
Would have been just like a week ago now.
a couple days ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, with that type of event, you had performances.
yes.
Is that the type of thing that you will do again, or is this more of a kickoff?
I mean, it's something we would definitely do again. I intentionally wanted the launch to highlight artists that I've worked with, artists that I've poured into, and really just celebrate excellence and community. Also intentionally wanted to launch on Emancipation Day and also in alignment with Crescendo Fest, just because we're in alignment with their values around turning up the volume on Black music. So I think for as a launch, as I mentioned, we definitely wanted to highlight the talent, but our mission is not only to just be doing showcases. It's
Mhm.
certainly a big aspect of it. But it's really thinking about how we can show up and take up space in various spaces. So sometimes it's a showcase, sometimes it's a song camp, sometimes it's a workshop, sometimes it's performance coaching, sometimes it's traveling to a conference, or sometimes it could be showing up in a conference in a different way that is maybe not a showcase, but maybe it's providing a party space. Like it evolves based on need and based on kind of what's happening in the industry. But again,
So,
we want to be. We want to be nimble. It's like, so I don't
yeah,
have an answer sometimes because it's like we don't know what's coming down the pipeline.
I was going to say you do seem to be like-minded in that if somebody needs help, you're probably open to hearing what that gap is for themselves. And
Exactly.
then if you yourself do not immediately know how to fulfill it, you will make an attempt with your organization to find someone that can
Yes.
or
Yeah,
allow
that's
for
accurate.
opportunity in the future to do it. So I definitely think that it's a great initiative. I'm looking forward to seeing what else is going to come out of your camp in the future. But I'm also wondering if there's anyone out there listening to this today and they're hearing what you have to say.
Mhm.
I'm sure a few people are like, hey, I think I fit into that bucket
Yeah.
and I think they may be able to help me with my goals. So, how would someone reach out to get assistance and get involved?
The best way to reach out to us is Instagram, Maidie Music House, and I'll spell it Maidie, and then Music House. I'm pretty active on Instagram, so if you slide into our DMs, we will hit you back.
And the naming is yourself. It's your grandmother that you named it
Yeah,
after?
so I named it after my grandmother. She really made music non-negotiable in our family, so everyone had to learn at least one instrument. And I think that, I mean, when I was younger, it kind of, was kind of annoying. But as I'm older, I think I really recognize how she really didn't believe that music was a luxury. Like she believed that it was part of our birthright and something that, we use music as a tool for self-expression. We use it for resistance. We use it for celebration. And I think that that is something really relatable to other people in the community. So I think especially in the East Coast where we're known for, a lot of people have grown up singing in the church, and then a lot of people, East Coast is known for their kitchen parties. Music is all around us. So I felt like I named it from my own personal connection, but I felt like it was also something that others can resonate with and that can identify with in terms of everyone kind of having a matey in their life. Yeah.
And I love that you had that influence. It's obviously very strong thread that ran through your life being what you do today.
Mhm.
I am curious now. This is very East Coast question, and I didn't want to lead with it. I want to make sure we get the good stuff in there.
Yeah.
But her last name was not Lopez. It was she was an Upshaw.
She was an Upshaw, yes. Her
So
married
any
name was Lopez, and her maiden
okay.
name was Upshaw. Yeah.
So is there a relation between her, you, and Jody Upshaw?
Yes, Jody is my cousin. Jody
There we go.
Upshaw. Hmm.
See, very East Coast
Most
question, not
most
necessarily.
Upshaws are related. So
Yeah,
if there was an Upshaw that you mentioned and I didn't know their name, the first thing I would do after this call, it would be asking my dad, Dad, do we know so and so? And he'd probably tell me that's so and so's niece, nephew, daughter, son, whatever. Yeah.
yeah. I definitely. Besides the whole East Coast, who's your dad? In
Yes.
introductions, I
Who's
uh,
your
I
people?
I definitely have some family that's into the whole genealogy thing, and I do find it interesting. Obviously, I like to talk to people and explore different perspectives and learn from the
Mhm.
experience as well, because I admit there's some areas where I do plead ignorance, and there's no reason I can't learn.
Yeah.
So I definitely like to find out in the background who's related to who on top of
Yeah.
the fact that you're working together. It really comes down to a networking thing too, but I will be curious to see what type of roster you end up with for artists that you're working with. And will you have a presence, being that a lot of my audience is up and coming musicians?
Mhm.
Do you plan to have a presence at upcoming things like Music Nova Scotia, ECMAs? Like, is that an area where people could be looking for maybe yourself or someone from your team as a delegate?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm on the board of Music Nova Scotia, so I'll definitely be at Music Week. In terms of Maidie Music House having a presence, I mean, our goal is to have a presence in a lot of these spaces when it makes sense. So when it makes sense and there's something that we can provide, then yes, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love to hear it. I love to hear all about these new initiatives that can help anyone out. But I also want to extend an invitation to any of the artists that you're working with. I do know that some of the up and coming artists that I personally work with, a lot of them come onto my radar because they want me to help them with media because I do interviews.
Okay.
So, any of the artists that are looking for, at very minimum, a podcast episode,
Yeah.
I can help them out with that, and we could always talk about some social media stuff too. I do a lot of crossover, so
Awesome.
I'm hoping to hear from some of your artists in the future. I'm glad that you yourself were able to make time to sit down and talk about this. Obviously, I learned a couple things as we went along. And I think I would like to learn a little bit more in the future. And the African Nova Scotia Music Association, I only know a little bit about them.
Mhm.
I would love to dive more into that as well. So if you, anyone from your team, or anyone from that organization would like to sit down and have kind of a follow-up conversation, I'm all about learning. So let's see what we can do about getting a follow-up in the books.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Right. Thanks again. And
Thank you.
I'm sure we're going to run into each other very soon.
I hope so.
Okay. Bye,
Awesome.
everyone.
Okay. Bye.